I would like to now introduce Tina Childress. She is presenting tonight on behalf of the Illinois School for the Deaf Outreach Program. She will be sharing tonight about apps, therapy apps for individuals with hearing loss. And so, Tina, would you go ahead and share more about yourself and continue on with the presentation?
Sure. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy nights to come out and listen to me today. As Carrie mentioned, I work for the Illinois School for the Deaf Outreach Program, and you all should have received an outline pretty much of what I was going to talk about. Normally, I do this in a PowerPoint, so it was kind of interesting trying to think about how I would do this with a phone call, but I think we can do it. I put a lot of links in the handouts that you got, and so all you have to do is click on the links and it'll send you to the different pages. So I'll just talk you through that. So I work for ISD half-time. I also work half-time in the Champaign School area as an educational audiologist. Many of you I've met or have known for a long time. I am a late deafened adult, and I use bilateral cochlear implants. You would laugh if you saw me right now in my hotel room. It looks like command center with my computer, my cell phone, my iPad at the ready. I feel like I need 8 arms like an octopus to try to get all this stuff going. But I'm really happy to talk to you guys about apps. I love all things technology, and so I hope that is my dual perspective as an audiologist and as a late deafened adult, that I can share this information with you in an effective way and so that it's simple and you guys can understand it. I started collecting apps probably a couple years ago now. I think it was like 2011, around Thanksgiving time actually, where I had started collecting apps, and then I was corresponding with a guy who maintains a Facebook page where they do reviews of apps, and I was talking with him, and he's like, you should start a list. So I started this list 2 years ago, and it started with maybe 25 apps, and at this point, I think it's up to over 300, and or around 300, and that's only the apps that I've added to the document that I'll share with you. I've actually probably looked at over 1,000 apps. So there's hundreds of thousands of apps out there, and I just kind of tried to sift through and find things that I thought would be very useful for individuals who are deaf and hard of hearing. So that's kind of about me. When I talk about the demographics, I'm at let's see, bullet point, or I'm under demographics about use of mobile technology. It's interesting. Did you guys realize that the iPad has only been around since April of 2010? And that always amazes me because there are probably over 120 million iPads at this point now that have been sold. There's probably approaching 1 million apps on the iTunes store. And it's just so prevalent in our lives and in school. Whereas in about 2010, 2011, most of the tablets that were out there were Apple devices. What we're seeing now is actually the shift towards people going for things like Android tablets or Nooks or Kindles. But when it comes to things like special education, we are still seeing mostly Apple devices there. So that's what I'm going to focus on this evening. Besides the fact that, people have asked me, Tina, when are you going to start a list for Android apps? And I thought, oh my gosh, if you clone me and give me 8 more hours in a day so that I can sleep, then maybe I'll think about it. So right now that's on the back burner. I'm still concentrating on Apple apps. So what I have listed on the handouts, if you do have a different kind of tablet, if you didn't already know, these are the links to the different stores for Android, BlackBerry, Windows, Nook, and Kindle. And, the Nook and the Kindle are so interesting to see how those have evolved, because whereas before they were just these, e-readers or these electronic readers, now you can surf the internet on them. There's specific apps available for them, and it's just really amazing to see how everything has really diversified, and you're just seeing so many more kind of tools in one device. So let's talk a little bit about accessibility. If you have a chance, click on that app or on that link that talks about accessibility, and the picture you guys will see, I thought that was kind of special because the kid that is there on that accessibility page has a cochlear implant. So I know that, you know, over the years, Apple has been really good about trying to make sure that their devices were accessible for people with hearing loss, vision loss, you know, fine motor skills, gross motor skills, things like that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what kind of things on the Apple devices make things accessible for people that are deaf or hard of hearing. So, of course, you have the front-facing camera, which is fantastic for things like lip reading cues. If you use listening and spoken language and want to do something like FaceTime or Skype, I know many people do that. Of course, also the front-facing camera is really great for things like video relay. You know, I can be in a coffee shop and just use my iPad and, you know, use an interpreter to talk to somebody or even talk point-to-point to somebody with my iPad, which is great. The other thing that we're seeing is that people are using the front-facing cameras, you know, not only on the iPad, but also on computers, you know, the webcam that's built in for things like telehealth. And what telehealth is say, for example, you want to do auditory verbal therapy, and there is no auditory verbal therapist that's near you, but they offer a telehealth option. And so I've seen this in Wisconsin where they do things where the parent and the child are at home and they're in front of their computer with their webcam, and the clinician or the therapist is in front of their computer in their home. You know, it could be 2 or 3 hours away. And so we're seeing, you know, some people starting to use this for things like therapy. I know that audiologists can use these for different applications. For things like cochlear implants, of course, you know, it's possible for a cochlear implant company to look at another patient's map, but they would not stimulate a patient remotely because that would be against the FDA guidelines. However, they can do some tweaking with the audiologist. So you just see all these different kinds of applications. It's really cool. When it comes to closed captioning, oh, the iPad is fabulous for that. If you've ever used iTunes, you'll see that there's always a search bar. If you type closed caption in the search bar on the iTunes store, it will pull up all of the movies, all of the shows that have closed captioning, and that is fantastic. One thing that's a little bit disappointing, though, is I didn't realize that the previews do not have closed captioning. So if you're thinking about watching a show and you're not sure if you want to buy it, unfortunately, there is no captioning for the preview. The other thing that makes the iPad accessible is they have something called mono audio. So what does that mean? True stereo means you have a right channel and you have a left channel. So, for example, if I was listening to a song, on the right channel, I might have the lyrics to the song. On the left channel, I would have the instrumental. And so true stereo headphones will separate those two signals. Well, but if you only have one implant or you only have one hearing aid, true stereo is not going to sound very good. So what you have the option to do is combine the right and the left channel together, and then you can present those to both ears. So you get both the lyrics and the instrumentals together going to each ear. So, you know, it's going to be pretty sophisticated if you're going to have a true stereo recording, but you might run into that sometimes. So if your kid is saying, I don't hear any words, all I hear is music, you might want to check the mono audio. And all of these accessibility options are found in your settings on your iPad. You go to General, Settings, and then you go to Accessibility, and that's where you would change it. Of course, the other thing that's really great about things like the iPad, it's, you know, I wish sometimes that I had like a vibration like the iPhone does, but there are plenty of other things to let you know that things have come up. You have the little badges, the little circles that come up. You can have drop-down menus or banners that come up to let you know if you've got an email or if one of your apps needs to be updated, things like that. So visual notifications are great. Siri is actually a very good motivator to make sure that kids have pretty clear speech. I laugh because some of my friends that have normal hearing, they'll be like, I don't think Siri understands New York accents because it doesn't always understand what I say. But if you've got a kid and they want to talk to Siri and Siri doesn't understand them, that's a great opportunity to talk about, you know, having clear speech or pronouncing a certain sound. So Siri can be a great tool for expressive language too. So when we talk about some of the advantages of the iPad, you know, we know that it's engaging, it's stimulating, it's very multimodal because you have the visual, you have the auditory, you have the tactile as well. We know that it's portable, and we're seeing it now, you know, in the classrooms. You can find accessories anywhere. I remember when I got my first iPad way back when, and it was so hard to find things like a case or a charger that was compatible with the iPad. And nowadays, you know, I could be standing in line at the gas station, and there will be multiple cables and chargers and all of that kind of stuff there. So we're really seeing it very much prevalent in mainstream society. Of course, some of the concerns are, you know, what is too much time on an iPad? You know, there's all those studies talking about the fact that you don't want kids to be on an iPad or, you know, be in front of a screen before they're 2 years old. And yet, you know, we have lots of families now that, you know, we see them, you know, giving their phone to the kid to try to occupy them. So we want to be careful about the iPad becoming an electronic babysitter or, you know, being a surrogate for the parent. The iPad is great, and it's so great when you can interact with your child, you know, just like with anything, with books or whatever, being able to do that. The other thing that's hard also is getting the child off the iPad, of course, and it makes me laugh because there's actually an app to get a child off the iPad. There's an app that will cut people off from watching YouTube for too long. So that seems kind of ironic to me. So we need to be careful about that use and, you know, setting limits. You know, I had, when my kids are like so addicted to the iPad or the iPhone, sometimes I'll make a rule. Okay, we'll do 15 minutes on the iPad, but then you need to do 15 minutes off and just do something else. I don't know about you guys, but sometimes when I try to get my kids off the iPad, it's like their brains are rewired. They're so different, and that is one of the concerns. You know, it's almost too stimulating, and it's almost like stimulating and sending all these endorphins to their brain, and when you cut them off, it's almost like a drug. So we do need to be careful about that. Another concern is that, you know, there's still a lot of stuff out there that's not captioned. However, that is changing a lot. We are seeing a lot more apps coming out with closed captioning embedded into it, which is fantastic. But the content itself has to be captioned. And that's not perfect yet, but there are a lot of people out there fighting for that to happen. If any of you have ever tried to run Flash application, a good example of that would be Starfall, the website starfall.com. If you've ever tried to put starfall.com on your iPad, you might see that it doesn't work. And the reason that it doesn't happen is way back when Steve Jobs was still alive, he butted heads kind of with the president of Adobe. And he's like, your product is not going on my iPad. So that's the reason that Flash doesn't run on the Apple iPad. However, there are some workarounds for that. There are apps that actually come up as a browser and will allow you to play Flash, and I'll tell you about that in a little bit. Okay, so when we talk about purchasing apps, you know, here are some of the things that I like to look for when I look for an app for someone that's deaf or hard of hearing. And for those of you that are parents, you know, I like things like multiple voice choices. So for example, if the app has the ability to have a male voice or a female voice, or there are even apps out there where you can record your own voice. One of my favorite apps for listening is called Auditory Verbal. And with Auditory Verbal, what they practice are the ling sounds. And you can actually record your own voice with the ling sounds And, you know, if the kid is in the car or you have like 5 minutes as you're getting ready in the morning, I don't know if you guys ever have 5 minutes. I don't think I ever have 5 minutes. But they could maybe play with this app, and it's kind of cool because you can record your own voice, and it will keep track of it for you. There's another app out there. It's called, I think, A+ Spelling, and it's by Alligator Apps. And what I like about that one is you can record a spelling test on there. And so you could have you could type out the word, and then you can record actually the spelling word. So if your child needs to listen for these different spelling words, it's a great way to practice. And then they get to spell it. So that one is really cool. So multiple voice choices are a great option. Was there a question? Okay, I thought I heard something. Okay, and then another thing is if you have an app where you're working on reading, it's really great if you can turn the text on so that they can practice reading. But if you're going to work on listening, you can turn the text off. And there are many apps where you have to go into the settings, and you can do that. Any kind of app that has a visual reinforcement, you know, little icons that pop up, a flashing screen to let you know that you got the word right. You know, there have been times when I've used an app and I didn't realize that I got it correct or incorrect. But then there's an app that will flash when it's right or flash when it's wrong, so those are great as well. There are many media players, like I said, that have closed captioning built in. Before I forget, I want to make sure to remind you guys, don't forget to update your apps. If you look at your app store and it has something like 56 on it, you are going to be taking some time to be updating some of your apps. And the reason that I recommend, you know, you need to keep up to date is, first of all, your operating system might change and then the apps might not work anymore. But also new features come out all the time. It's been interesting to watch things like Netflix and Hulu and things like ABC, CBS, things like that start embedding the and updating with the captioning. So make sure you update your apps. If you can find an app that has record keeping, there are many of those out there as well. And that is really great if you want to keep track of correct and incorrect responses, because it'll maybe give you a percentage, it might give you a bar graph, and you can email it to people, you can save it as a document on your iPad, and it's just a really great way to keep track of things. So I really like apps that have that. So when it comes to searching for apps, you know, what is the best way to search for an app? Sometimes I'll go into the iTunes store and I'll just type the word deaf, and I'll see what pops up. You know, a lot of them are sign language things, but you might find some listening things on there too. So in the handout, I do have some keywords and key phrases that I suggest that, you know, you can look up and see what's out there. And you could just, you know, see what it says on iTunes. I very much also recommend that you read the reviews and look at the screenshot of the apps while you're in the iTunes store. I don't know. I think there are certain apps that there's a look to them that I don't like. So for me, if it's too cartoony or it looks too simple, I might not choose that app. So it's a great way to screen it. I'm glad that they have those screenshots because it can give me a lot of information. And then, of course, the reviews from other people are so helpful because they've already run through it. You know, they'll tell you if it's good or if it's bad, you know, what updates are there. So make sure to read the reviews. Another thing to be aware of is if the app says free or light, that means that it might just be a small sample of the full app, or there might be what are called in-app purchases. So make sure that if you have a kid that likes to press all of the buttons and, you know, the ads come up in apps and things like that, and you don't want them to do that, there is a way to lock them out of in-app purchases, because you never want to get your credit card bill and see that your kid charged, you know, $40 worth of coins for a certain game because they kept pressing the buttons in the app. So you can turn off the in-app purchases. Okay. Now, when you purchase an app, there are several ways that you can do that. In order to get an app, you need to have what's called an Apple ID. I didn't realize that you could get an Apple ID and not use a credit card. So some people are very much against, they don't have a credit card. So how do they get an Apple ID? There are resources all over the web that tell you how to get an Apple ID without a credit card, so you can keep that in mind. iTunes gift cards are really great. My daughter just turned 12, and she asked for 2 things for her birthday. She asked for iTunes gift cards and duct tape. So she ended up with about 12 rolls of duct tape and about $200 in iTunes gift cards, which she can use for music, which she can use for apps that she likes, for some of the games that she plays. And, those are fun gifts. And speaking of gifts, you can actually gift an app. So I had a friend who was a therapist, and for Christmas, there was an app that she used with a lot of her kids. So for Christmas that year, she actually gifted the app to those families. And the app was like 99 cents. And she, sent it out to 10 families. And wow, what a great use of, $10. Really easy, something that is on the iPad and can stay. The other thing you can do is you can pay as you go. So, if you don't have iTunes gift cards, it'll just confirm that you want to purchase that app. So you can just, if you have a credit card, then you can enter it in at that time. So you have a lot of options for purchasing apps. So in terms of strategy, there is actually a strategy that I kind of follow when it comes to purchasing apps. I love it when I see that paid apps go free. And as you see in the handout, once you buy or download an app, it's yours. So if there's an app out there, even if you think you might not need it and it's paid and it goes to free, you can download it to your iPad. And if you say, oh, I don't think I need this app, you can delete it off your iPad, but it stays in the cloud. It stays in your iTunes store. And let's say a month down the line, you decide, oh, maybe I can use that app. All you have to do is download it, and it's really simple that way. So once you buy an app, it's yours. If there's an app out there and you see it go on sale, meaning you have to pay for it, and you're like, oh, should I get this, should I not? Almost all apps will go on sale at some point. I usually am cheap, and I wait till they go on, they go for free. But the thing to think about is that apps are changing all the time. It amazes me to think about how simple and some of the apps were, 2 years ago, and there's so much more that you see now in apps. So, and they're a lot fancier. So there's always stuff coming out. Now, when it comes to shopping for apps, my favorite places to shop are, of course, iTunes. I'll just, like I said, put in a keyword and see what's in there. The way that I find out about apps is I have something called Google Alerts. And so what Google does, when a developer puts out an app, they usually have some kind of press release. And in the press release, they say that, this app is designed for deaf or hard of hearing, and this is what it does. And so what happens is I get an email because I have some of those keywords again, and that's how I find out that about some of those apps, is I get those Google Alerts, and then I share it with people. Another really great website is on your handout. It's called App Shopper. So let's say that there's an app that you want, but it's too expensive at this time. You add it to your App Shopper wish list, and if the price goes down or if it goes for free, you will get an email from App Shopper telling you that the app has gone for free or is discounted. So that's really great. There are also lots of social media sites to find out about apps. I find out probably the most from Facebook. I also repost on Facebook, so you can find me on Facebook. I'll tell you, I have a personal page, and then I also have a page for my blog if you don't want to. Most of the stuff I post on my personal page relates to hearing loss, but I also have one just for my blog if you don't want all of that also. But anytime there's an app out there that I think is pretty cool, I'll put it up on Facebook. There are, of course, dozens of Pinterest sites that you can find out, about different topics and different apps that are out there. Really, also really great resource is YouTube. I think YouTube is great because it actually will show you how to use the app or different things that you can do. So with these short video clips. So YouTube is another great tool. Now, when it comes to accessories, there are lots of ways that you can what's called tether your phone sometimes if you pay for that service. And what tethering does is you have a data plan, and then that's where you get things like your voice. You might get texting, you might get email, and you can do surfing. That's your data. And then you also have Wi-Fi, and that's where you can access a Wi-Fi hotspot, like at a Starbucks or something like that. There are, when you tether, you take that data signal and you make it to a Wi-Fi hotspot, which then your iPad can pick up. There are iPads out there that have data built into it, and you have to pay a monthly fee. I have always just gotten Wi-Fi only iPads, and the reason is I can make my cell phone into a hotspot, which is really nice. There are times when if you travel around and maybe there's no hotspot, there's no Wi-Fi signal where you're at. For those of you guys that are teachers, and especially if you're an itinerant teacher that travels, you know that you may not have the Wi-Fi password for every school you go to. Or you might have, be in a basement where the Wi-Fi signal is really kind of spotty. You may be able to make a hotspot with your phone. So investigate those options. If you have a kiddo that likes to press all the buttons on your iPad and gets into trouble and goes into apps that they're not supposed to and buy things, there is something called guided access. And the link is there on your handout. And with guided access, you can kind of restrict what the child can and can't do. And that link has a lot of really great information. The other link that I have on there is a product called Bubcaps. And what it is, it's actually a little sticker, a very rigid sticker that goes over the home button of your iPad. And so the kid has to press really, really hard, and sometimes they can't do that, to get to that home button. So that is kind of a low-tech way if you don't want to do guided access. There are so many cases that are out there. There's cases that rotate, so you could look at something in portrait mode or landscape mode. There's cases that you can drop that's waterproof. Figure out which one is the best for you. When it comes to headphones, if your child uses headphones with their iPad, I do recommend using one that's cupped, meaning there's almost like a ring around the headphone. You don't want the headphones that are like the flat, foamy kind, because when it's up against your hearing aid or your cochlear implant, there's sound leaking out, there's sound leaking in. With the cupped ones, though, if you have a kid using hearing aids, you may get some feedback, so that's something to consider. There are things called amplified neck loops that are out there, and I actually use a neck loop all the time when I drive because I'm supposed to be hands-free. You can have one that has a cord that can plug into the headphone jack of the iPad, or you can also have one that's Bluetooth. So, when I drive around, I have this Bluetooth neck loop and my phone is in my purse. My phone rings, I press the button on the neck loop, and I can talk directly into it. And if you guys want suggestions for that, I think I have some of them on the document with the apps that I'll talk about in a minute. We talked a little bit about, I think I forgot to talk about this. One of the other concerns about the iPad or listening to iPhone or iPod and things like that is that it can be too loud sometimes. Kids play, it's so loud. I tell my daughter, if I can hear the sound coming out of your headphones, then it's too loud. You need to turn it down. And so there are headphones that are out there that can limit the output, and I have those links on your handout as well. So if your child, still has some residual hearing, meaning, they haven't lost all of their hearing yet, you want to save that. You don't want it to get exposed to sound that's too loud. You can limit that with some of these accessories that I talk about. For those children and like me that have hearing aids or cochlear implants, know that all hearing aids and cochlear implants do have what's called like a ceiling level so that things aren't too loud. So it's not, especially for the cochlear implant kids, it's not such a concern because it will never get too loud for us. But for kids that have hearing aids, let's say that they have hearing loss more in the high frequencies but not the low frequencies, you do want to protect those low frequency hearings. So those are some accessories that you can buy. Of course, there are also external speakers that you can buy for your iPad. I was always shocked to find how quiet some of the apps would be, or even music could be on the iPad. And that's because the speaker for the iPad is in the back. And so it actually projects backwards. So there's little Bluetooth speakers that you can get that are very powerful and that have really, really good sound. And, I'll use that sometimes when I listen to music. So in terms of tips, again, make sure you update your apps. And I also really recommend that you set a passcode. If you're working in the schools, you have really sensitive, HIPAA-protected information that's on your iPad. And so you want to make sure that you have a passcode there so that people can't access your information. There is also an app called Find My iPhone. So if someone happens to steal your iPad, you can actually either locate it and or remotely wipe it. And I know that Allison is on the line. We were actually at a Walk for Hearing event a couple of years ago, and someone broke into my car and stole my iPad. And so I was able to wipe it remotely. I just gotten the Find My iPhone app on there, so you need to be careful about that. There are apps out there also that you could use PDFs on your iPad. So for example, if you have a worksheet that you like to use over and over and over again, you can save that worksheet as a PDF, save it to your iPad, and then you can actually, if it's like a matching kind of thing, you can do matching on your iPad, save that document, and then that way you're not wasting paper. You can do that all electronically. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about my list. The list is called Apps for Kids and Adults with Hearing Loss. And, let's say, obviously you're not, if you forget to bookmark it, if you just search my name and you say Apps for Kids and Adults with Hearing Loss, the list will pop up. And there are different categories on there. And so, like I said, there's probably 300 apps that are on there. And what I did is I separated them into categories. And you see that on your handout. Like, it's kind of weird doing this over the phone, so I don't obviously have any screenshots, but things that I think that are really, really good, I have listed on the handout. Remember that, so for accessibility, you have CaptionFish, which is a great app to tell you about movies that are playing in your area in theaters, and it tells you if they're captioned or not. And so when I travel, if I say, I have a night free at the hotel, let's see what movies are out that have captioning, I'll go to CaptionFish, and you can find it. It used to be an app that's no longer available on the Apple Store, but they are thinking of bringing it back. But I felt like I really should give you the website because you can access that on your browser, and it's a great, great resource. If you use any speech to text kind of apps, so an example might be Dragon Dictation, where someone talks into your iPad or your phone, and then you might see the text printed out. Be aware that all of those apps need internet. So if you're someplace that you have a really weak signal, those kind of apps may not work. Okay. So the next category is advocacy. And there is a company called Rule the School, and they have some really great apps specifically designed for kids that are deaf or hard of hearing. I recommend that you check those out. Sketch is an app where you can take a picture. So let's say one of my itinerant teachers uses it when they're talking about preferential seating in the classroom. They'll take a picture of the classroom, and then you can draw on it and say, this is a good place to sit, this is not a good place to sit, because your bad ear is facing the teacher, you need to be on the other side of the classroom. So, using pictures, and it's also great for learning their classmates' name and what they look like also. I've seen our teachers use that. Going down to the next category for audiology, all three, well, right now, Cochlear and Medel have cochlear implant troubleshooting guides that are fantastic. So if you can't remember how to change a battery or switch programs, there's an app you can download that you can then access if you need help with troubleshooting. There's an app called DrawMD ENT that's listed on your handout. And what it is, it's a picture of the ear. So as an audiologist, I'll use this while I'm counseling parents. And so I show them this app, and you can make things like an ear tube. You can put earwax in the ear canal. There's all kind of fun things that you can do with DrawMD. If you're working on if you're talking about how the ear works, it's a really nice visual that you can use. ClearPath has a section under counseling where you can actually enter in an audiogram and do a simulation in different listening environments without hearing loss. So that one is free also, and I really like that one. There's a section on classroom tools that have lots of things like data tracking. So if you have to do any kind of observations in the classroom and you need to observe different things, the data tracking tool is on there. The next category is hearing test. Of course, as an audiologist, I would never say, use a hearing test instead of seeing a licensed audiologist. But if you just want to screen or you want to show your parents that, okay, you really need to think about getting hearing aids, some of these hearing test apps can be kind of useful. The next category is listening therapy, and that is for sure the biggest section of my app list. There are dozens and dozens of apps out there that you can use for listening therapy, and I have some of my favorite ones listed on there. The next category is media player, and so that's where you have things like, like I said, Netflix, Hulu, things like that. One of my favorite apps is called SoundHound, and what SoundHound does is, let's say you're listening to the radio and there's a song that comes on. You have no idea what that song is or even what the words are. And I always tell my daughter, even though I'm deaf, I know there are hearing people out there too that don't understand lyrics to some of this music. So SoundHound listens to the song. It'll pull up the artist. It'll pull up the song. It'll pull up the album that it came from. And if available, it'll also pull up the lyrics. So that's a really, really great app. The next one is Personal Amplifier, and I'm kind of leery about these. I have a link on there that sends you to an article about how to be very careful about these. And personal amplifiers, it's like hearing aids, or like listening in on people, like spying on them. And you have to be careful because some of these over-amplify, almost 130 decibels, some of these apps we're getting to, so way, way too loud. We did just see the first made for iPhone hearing aids come out, and that was from GN Resound, and it's a hearing aid called Lynx, L-I-N-X. And with the Lynx hearing aid, you can actually listen directly from your phone if you have music or if you're on a phone call, and it goes directly to your hearing aids without any kind of streamer device. So some of the hearing aid companies now are working with the iPhone to try to do that, so that's coming out. The next category is sign language. There's lots and lots of sign language apps out there, but be careful because it'll say sign language and it's only teaching you the alphabet. Okay, so in my section, I have some apps that are storytelling, that are books, and of course then there are apps that also teach sign language, so that's on there. The next category is sound level meter, and I use these. I am the first person to be in a restaurant, pull out my sound level meter app, and then show it to the manager and tell them, please turn down the music. It's way, way too loud. On the list, you'll see which ones can be calibrated. Some of them cannot. And so what that means is they're actually often overestimating the sound level. So it might say 90 decibels when it's really only 70. I mean, I guess that would work to our advantage, but if you're going to use it like in an observation or something, you want to make sure it's calibrated. I do have some apps on speech. I think I found over the months that I'm not concentrating so much on that. There's plenty of lists that have speech apps. Telecommunications, so that's where I talk about apps where you could use video relay or caption telephone. Those are all listed on there. And then the last section of my app list are resources. So my favorite developers, blogs, websites, things like that, it's all on that list, okay? I do have a blog, and it's called Getting From There to Here, and the URL is there also on your handout. It's not so much bloggy where I talk about a lot of things, except for I do talk about apps in that part of the blog, but it's more kind of informational, like a hub for information. And so what I figured out actually is the social bookmarking site that I have listed has actually been more useful for that. So for all of these links that I've been saving and collecting over the years, I've saved them and organized them by category, or also known as tag. And you can find that also on that delicious.com website. So that was a lot of information. And I thought now would be a good time to open it up to questions. You know, I definitely encourage you to take a look at the app list, see if there's things on there. You know, I listed it so you'll see the icon for the app. You'll find a link if it's underlined in blue. You can click on it. It'll send you directly to the iTunes store. It'll have the price of the app at the time that I reviewed it, you know, and the prices, like I said, do change. There's a short description. There is the category that it's in. There is the website to the developer in case you have questions. And then the last column is actually pretty important because it has the date that I added it to the list. So let's say you say, wow, I haven't checked Tina's list since May. What apps has she added? And you can do that by looking at the date that it was added. So, okay, I'm going to stop talking now. Do you guys have any questions?
This is Carrie, and I'm just going to start by saying, first of all, Tina, thank you. And then I'm going to go into, because I'm sure a lot of you are like, where is this handout? And so when I posted this, because I don't know who's going to call in until you call in, there was no way to get this to you before the call, except through sending it out with a reminder email, which was done last week, and it was also posted on our Facebook site. And as of tomorrow morning, all your parent guides, for those of you that have parent guides, will also have that list. So don't worry about handouts. They're in a couple different locations, and you can access them, you know, very soon, if not right now. So there you go. Any other questions?
Oh, sorry about that, Carrie. I didn't realize that. Okay. You guys learned everything you needed to know about apps. That's fabulous. I guess I overwhelmed them too.
This is George Arliss. I have a question. Can you hear me?
I sure can. Go ahead, George.
All right. Yeah, my daughter is hearing impaired, and in the school that she's going to right now, they've kind of done a little test with her. They put an iPad at her desk, and she's a phenomenal lip reader. She's in the 4th grade. So she can follow the teacher as the teacher's talking from what she can hear and what she can read on the lips. But the teacher turns her head, she'll lose stuff. And so the assistant in the class will type on her computer, and it'll go to her iPad. So if she missed something, she can look down and she can, get back on track with the class. Are there any apps that you found that, like, the school systems are using that could be kind of tied in with this iPad thing that they're doing with her?
Now, are you talking like voice recognition software, George?
No, it's not. It's not necessarily voice recognition software. It's more like, what are the public schools using for children that are hard of hearing? Are they using any kind of applications like what I just described?
I've never heard of that application, and I think that's a great application for text. I guess I'm just thinking, you know, as an audiologist, auditorily, you know, they have FM systems that they use, but I've never seen, and there are some schools that will use voice recognition software that goes to text, and then, you know, it's like CART. When I say CART, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, yeah, I know what you mean by CARTs, right, yes.
Okay, and so they'll use that, but of course voice recognition software is not there yet, whereas it's just voice recognition software. But I don't, let me back up a little bit. I know that there's an app, it's by Dragon, here let me pull it up, and it's called Dragon Microphone. And so you have Dragon Dictation, which can work pretty well if the speech is clear, it's not noisy, and the person is close to the iPad. There are situations, though, where you almost need a remote microphone closer to the teacher. And so what Dragon Microphone is the teacher might hold like an iPhone in their pocket or, you know, somehow hold it close to their mouth, and it acts like a microphone, which will then talk to the iPad with voice recognition software. So it's just bringing the microphone closer to their mouth. So I haven't seen that used in the school, but it, you know, that was one application that they talked about.
And that was called Dragon Microphone?
Dragon Microphone.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? All right. Feel free, my email address is on that list. If you have any questions about any of the apps, you know, for sure, let me know. I also recommend really that you guys go to YouTube also if there's an app and you just want to see what it looks like in action, see if they have a YouTube video. Or maybe the website will have a demo of the app. Often they do that, and that's a great way to figure out if it'll fit your needs. So I think that's it, Carrie.
Excellent. Well, thank you again, Tina, so much for being on the call tonight and sharing with us and really doing everything from the apps to how to make better use of our iPads. So great sharing. Thank you. And thank you all for being on the call tonight. If anyone does want the recording, it will be available tomorrow. All you have to do is just either let your parent guide know or let me know, and I will be more than happy to get that to you. Thank you again, everyone, and have a great night.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks.